Let's shift our attention to contemporary human rights issues that continue to challenge our world today. In this lecture, we will focus on the intersection of human rights and armed conflict. While war and violence are often seen as inevitable parts of human history, it's crucial to understand that even in times of conflict, human rights still apply. The devastating impact of armed conflict on human rights. Armed conflicts have a devastating impact on human rights. They displace millions of people, destroy homes and livelihoods, and create conditions of extreme poverty and deprivation. Conflict often leads to a breakdown of law and order, creating an environment where human rights abuses can flourish. Here are some of the specific ways in which armed conflicts violate human rights. Right to life. Armed conflicts often result in the indiscriminate killing of civilians, as well as targeted attacks on hospitals, schools, and other civilian infrastructure. Freedom from torture and cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment. Torture, sexual violence, and other forms of cruel treatment are often used as weapons of war, inflicting unimaginable suffering on victims. Right to liberty and security. Armed conflicts often lead to arbitrary detention, enforced disappearances, and other violations of the right to liberty and security. Freedom of expression and association. In conflict zones, journalists, human rights defenders, and other voices of dissent are often targeted and silenced. Economic, social, and cultural rights. Conflict disrupts access to essential services like healthcare, education, and clean water, leading to widespread suffering and deprivation. International Humanitarian Law, IHL, protecting human rights in war. International Humanitarian Law, or IHL, also known as the Laws of War, is a set of rules that seek to limit the effects of armed conflict. IHL aims to protect people who are not or are no longer participating in hostilities and to restrict the means and methods of warfare. While IHL and human rights law are distinct bodies of law, they are complementary and mutually reinforcing. Both seek to protect human dignity and limit the suffering caused by armed conflict. Key principles of IHL include distinction. Parties to a conflict must distinguish between civilians and combatants, and between civilian objects and military objectives. Attacks may only be directed against military objectives. Proportionality. Attacks must not be excessive in relation to the concrete and direct military advantage anticipated. Necessity. Military actions must be limited to what is necessary to achieve a legitimate military objective. Humanity. Parties to a conflict must treat all persons humanely and must not inflict unnecessary suffering. Challenges and the role of international community. Protecting human rights in armed conflict is extremely challenging. It requires holding perpetrators accountable. Those who violate IHL and human rights law must be held accountable for their actions. Providing assistance to victims. Victims of armed conflict need humanitarian assistance, medical care, and psychosocial support. Preventing future conflicts. The international community needs to invest in conflict prevention and peace-building efforts. Strengthening international law. The laws of war need to be constantly updated and strengthened to address new challenges, such as the use of autonomous weapon systems. By understanding the impact of armed conflict on human rights and the legal framework that seeks to protect them, we can better advocate for the rights of those caught in the crossfire and work towards a more peaceful and just world.